As the party in South Beach slowed following the Heat's 2012 championship, the franchise turned its focus to the coming 2012-13 season. While LeBron spent the summer in London representing Team USA on the gold-winning basketball team, the Miami front office made moves looking to continue to upgrade the supporting cast around the Big Three. After securing veteran forward Rashard Lewis, the basketball world was shocked when Ray Allen, a member of Boston's infamous Big Three, chose to sign with the Heatles in free agency after disagreements with the Celtics organization over his new contract and role with the team moving forward. The 2012-13 regular season was the Heatles' most successful regular season in their 4-year run. They rattled off a 27-game winning streak, the second longest in NBA history, defeated every single team in the NBA for the first time in franchise history, and became the first team in NBA history to win 17 games in 1 month, finishing the year with a 66-16 record. On top of these team accolades, LeBron had one of the best regular seasons of his personal career up to that point. He would win a second straight MVP.
LeBron James now officially in rarefied NBA air, winning his 4th MVP in 5 years.
And averaged nearly 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists, including a 6-game stretch where he became the only player in NBA history to average 30 points per game while shooting better than 60% from the field. Having secured the top seed in the East, and the league for that matter, the Heat kicked things off against the Milwaukee Bucks.
Well, certainly on paper, it's a mismatch.
Yeah.
And how many games?
6. We're gonna win the 6.
What was your reaction, team's reaction, when Brandon Jennings said, well, you know, it's a good series, but we're gonna win this thing in 6?
That was my reaction.
And an uneventful series that saw Miami sweep in 4. Following their extended time off from their first round sweep, the Heat came out rusty in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Chicago Bulls. Behind a gutsy performance out of Nate Robinson, the Bulls capitalized on the Heat's subpar outing and stole Game 1 in Miami. The Heat would waste no time in responding, however, absolutely blasting the Bulls off the court in Game 2, and then taking the next 3 games in dominant fashion, finishing the series off in 5. Back in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Heat would face off against a Pacers team that had given them more problems than expected the previous season, and this year would be no different. The two teams traded back and forth blows during a highly competitive Game 1 in Miami, but it was LeBron James who came through in the clutch, sinking a game winner in overtime as time expired. The Pacers would strike right back in Game 2, evening the series at 1-1 with the action shifting back to Indiana. In Indiana, the two teams would continue trading blows as the Heat won in a dominant Game 3 performance, while the Pacers led wire to wire to take Game 4. Back in Miami for Game 5, an already chippy series boiled over, with multiple scuffles breaking out during the game. Despite a slow start, the Heat found their rhythm and protected their home court, going up 3-2 in the series and setting up a potential series-clinching game back in Indiana. Unfortunately for the Heat, the Pacers weren't going down without a fight, and behind strong performances from Roy Hibbert and Paul George, they set up a highly anticipated Game 7 back in Miami with a trip to the NBA Finals on the line. Lucky for Heat fans, Game 7 was rather anticlimactic, as the Heat used their suffocating team defense to race out to an early lead and never look back, securing the series win and their 3rd consecutive Eastern Conference title. The Heatles returned to the NBA Finals for the 3rd straight season, looking to defend their previous season's championship. Their Western Conference foes were the San Antonio Spurs, led by the ageless core of Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili, and coached by one of the all-time greats in Greg Popovich. While NBA fans all over eagerly awaited the high-profile matchup, perhaps no one was more excited than LeBron James, who relished the opportunity to get revenge against the Spurs team that had embarrassed him back in 2007 when they swept him in his first finals appearance. Game 1 in Miami would be a competitive one, with the game going back and forth. The Spurs would steal the game late, however, when Tony Parker hit a wild shot to put the Spurs up 4 with 5 seconds remaining.
Nearly lost it, still dribbling. Parker with 2 to shoot. Just gets it off in time, and he banks it in! What a shot from Parker!
Following the disappointing loss, the Heat responded big time in Game 2. They pulled away in the second half to blow out San Antonio in a game that was highlighted by LeBron James' block on Thiago Splitter.
4 to shoot. Parker, Spread the Heat. Oh, what a block from James! Throws it back at Splitter, who is ready to dunk.
As the finals shifted back to San Antonio for 3 games, the Heat knew they needed at least 1 win to move the series back to Miami to finish. Unfortunately, that 1 win would not come in Game 3.
Drives down the lane, dunks it with 2 hands.
The Spurs blew the Heat off the court, hitting a then finals record 16 3-pointers en route to a 36-point victory.
At the buzzer,
The tables would turn, however, in what was really a must-win Game 4 for the Heatles behind Dwayne Wade's best performance of the postseason up to that point, and 33 points from LeBron James, evening the series out at 2 games apiece. The Spurs finished things off in San Antonio, winning Game 5 and taking the 3-2 series lead, with the finals moving back to South Beach to finish. Game 6 of the 2013 NBA Finals is undoubtedly one of the best games in Finals history. Smelling blood in the water and knowing he was just a single victory away from claiming his 5th NBA title, Tim Duncan turned back the clock in the first half of Game 6, scoring 25 points on 11 of 13 shooting and giving the Spurs the 50-44 edge at the half. In what was a wild second half that at different points saw Mike Miller hit a shoeless three-pointer.
Let's see what he can do. Now LeBron to Miller. One shoe, three.
Got it! Who needs 2 shoes? Miller doesn't. 1 shoe, 3.
And LeBron James loses trademark headband. The Spurs ultimately seemed to have control late. Up 5 with under 30 seconds remaining, American Airlines Arena security began rolling out the yellow tape in anticipation of San Antonio's championship celebration, and some Miami fans even began leaving the arena feeling all hope was lost. Almost no one could have predicted what happened next. After a missed three-pointer, Mike Miller would grab an offensive rebound, get the ball to LeBron James, who then knocked in a three-pointer with 20 seconds to play, cutting the lead to 2. After Kawhi Leonard went 1 of 2 from the free throw line, one of the biggest shots of the Heatles era was made. With under 10 seconds left, this happened.
Should the Spurs foul? Should Miami go for the 3 right away? Just attack the basket. James catches, puts up a 3. Won't go. Rebound Bosh. Back out to Allen. His 3-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
In a back-and-forth overtime period, the Heat went on to prevail after Chris Bosh blocked a Danny Green three-pointer attempt as time expired. This incredible comeback set up Game 7 in Miami, with the winner set to be crowned world champs.
It's gonna pay off. They say hard work pay off.
In a competitive Game 7 that saw the Heat lead by just 2 points with under a minute to play, LeBron James would come through in the clutch yet again.
With a 2-point lead and 39 seconds left.
James pulls up.
Sinking the dagger to put the Heat up 4 late and clinching the Miami Heat's 2nd consecutive NBA championship and a finals series for the ages. LeBron James was crowned Finals MVP for the 2nd straight season, and the party started back up in South Beach. As the summer of 2013 winded down, the Heat began to turn their focus to their newest goal, defending their NBA title and becoming one of only 4 teams to three-peat as NBA champions. The Heatles wasted no time finding their groove in the new season, racing out to a 22-6 mark through their first 28 games. Their hot start began to dwindle as the season wore on, however. They limped to the finish line of the regular season, posting an 11-14 record in their final 25 games, which gave them the 2 seed in the East behind the Indiana Pacers. Quest for a three-peat would kick off against the Charlotte Bobcats in a snooze fest of a series that saw Miami sweep in 4. In the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Heat would face off against a Brooklyn Nets team that boasted 2 very familiar faces to the Heat in Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. While the Heat won both games soundly in Miami, the Nets would win Game 3 back in Brooklyn before LeBron James erupted for 49 in Game 4, giving the Heat a 3-1 lead heading back to Miami. In a Game 5 performance that didn't necessarily see the Heat play their strongest basketball, it was Ray Allen who hit the go-ahead shot late in the game to seal the series for the Heat and give him the win over his former Boston co-part. The Indiana Pacers would await the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals for the 2nd consecutive season. The Pacers were hungry to extract revenge on Miami, seeing as the Heat had knocked them out of the playoffs the previous 2 seasons. But this year it was they who held the top seed in the East. As the action got underway, it was the Pacers that took control early, winning Game 1. Game 2 was a different story though, with the Heat taking control late behind big fourth quarter performances out of LeBron and Wade, evening the series at 1 game apiece as things moved to Miami. At home, the Heat played like the defending champs they were, winning Games 3 and 4 to take full control of the series 3-1. In an exciting Game 5, the Pacers were able to hold off a late Miami rally behind the clutch shooting of Paul George. Having no interest in returning to Indiana for Game 7, the Heat were all business in Game 6 at home, jumping out to an early lead and never looking back. With the win, they clinched the Eastern Conference title for the 4th consecutive year and were headed back to the NBA Finals with a three-peat on their minds. Their 2014 Finals opponent would be a familiar one. The San Antonio Spurs had used the previous year's heartbreak to fuel their 2013-14 run that saw them post the best regular season record in the NBA. With their same core roster back and the emergence of third-year player Kawhi Leonard as a star forward and lockdown defender, the Heatles had their hands full in their quest for a three-peat. Game 1 in San Antonio was one for the history books. After a back-and-forth first half, it was announced at halftime that due to an electrical outage within the arena, the air conditioning was out.
An electrical failure for the power that runs the AC is malfunctioning. It's now reading above 90 degrees.
The tight score in the 4th quarter, LeBron would go down with cramps and was forced to spend the majority of the pivotal action watching from the bench. With LeBron out, the Spurs would pull away late and take the 1-0 series.
The San Antonio Spurs take Game 1 of the 2014 NBA. Welcome to Game 2 of the NBA Finals.
In a competitive Game 2, the Heat would find themselves down 1 with 90 seconds remaining when Chris Bosh would step up to hit a huge three-pointer that would end up catapulting the Heat to a Game 2 victory, evening the series at 1 apiece with 2 games coming up in Miami. Unfortunately, Game 3 was the beginning of the end for the Heat, as the Spurs absolutely exploded in the first half behind red-hot shooting and saw their lead balloon to as much as 25 in the first half. They never looked back and soundly took Game 3. Game 4 in Miami was more of the same. The Spurs once again cooked Miami's defense in the first half and saw their lead exceed 20 points in the opening half of play. Having stolen both games on Miami's home court in such a dominant fashion, Game 5 was more or less a foregone conclusion prior to tip. Despite a hot start from LeBron James early, the Spurs came roaring back as the game wore on with more hot shooting and went on to win Game 5, officially getting their revenge and avenging the previous season's heartbreak. For the Heat, this was their first finals loss in 3 years, and the future now looked very murky for one large reason. LeBron James' contract in South Beach was up, and it was unclear whether he planned to stay or not. The fact of the matter was this though, the 2014 Miami Heat looked incredibly different from the 2010 Miami Heat. Dwayne Wade, who had played Robin to LeBron's Batman, was clearly in the back half of his career with his best years behind him. Chris Bosh, the often overlooked member of the Big Three, was still productive, but also set to turn 30 that coming season, and had likely already played the best basketball of his career. Outside of Wade and Bosh, there were only 2 other players in the Heat rotation younger than 34 years old, Mario Chalmers and Norris Cole. The conclusion was easy to draw. The Heat were an old team with limited cap space moving forward. On July 11, 2014, after weeks of speculation, LeBron James announced via Sports Illustrated article that he was leaving Miami and returning to Cleveland. With this decision, the Big Three era in Miami came to a close. The 2010 to 2014 Miami Heatles will undoubtedly go down in the history books as one of the most important teams in NBA history. LeBron's decision to join the Heat in 2010 started the player empowerment movement, and super teams have become a regular in the league ever since. Nonetheless, those 4 seasons in South Beach were the ultimate roller coaster, and their ride is one the NBA will never forget.